I can tell you right now, I have way too much material. I don't think we're going to get it all covered, but we're going to start, and I'll kind of watch the clock. If we can get it all done, we'll get it all done. But we are going to continue decoding the book of Daniel. Now, I have here on this first slide, and I also have it on your notes, where you can see how the book of Daniel should be read. You want to read chapters 1 through 4. They are all about Nebuchadnezzar. Then you want to read it in this order, chapter 7 and then 8 and then chapter 5, and they're all about King Belshazzar. Then you want to read chapter 6 and then 9 and then 11 and then 12. You will find they are all about King Darius the Mede. Then you want to conclude with Daniel chapter 10, which is all about Cyrus. And you're going to see over the next several weeks why you need to read it chronological order, because you're going to discover things you never would have known if you did not read it in this order. Now, last week, there was something I didn't really expound on that I had some emails, calls saying, would you please expound on those 2,300 days mentioned in the book of Daniel? So I don't know if this made it on your notes, but it's from Daniel chapter 8, verse 13 and 14. Is that on your notes? Okay. Just reference this verse and listen. This is from last week. That's why it's not on your notes for this week. But Daniel 8, 13 and 14 is where it talks about, I'm just going to refresh your memory so I can help you understand where we're coming from. Last week in Daniel 8, 13 and 14, now you have to understand this is the King James Version, which is wrong. Oh, I don't mean to offend any of you King James only. But it says, I heard one saint speaking and another saint, and said unto that certain saint which spoke, how long will be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said to me, unto 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Now, how many have heard of that verse before? And how many have tried to figure out the 2,300 days? I can tell you right now, it's not 2,300 days. That's the first problem. Let's listen to this next verse, and I'm going to put the verses up on the screen so that way you guys can follow along, since it's not in your notes and you can reference it. Listen to Exodus 29, 38 and 39. Now this is that which you shall offer upon the altar, 2 lambs of the first year, day by day continually. 1 lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at dusk, or in the evening. Okay? Now, I'm going to just read Daniel 8. We're going to go back to that. Let's look at verses 8 through 10 to give us the context of all of this 2,300 days. Here's how it begins, and you should remember from last week what this is talking about. It talks about the he-goat magnified himself exceedingly, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. The he-goat was what country? Greece. The great horn is Alexander the Great. Okay, this is talking about historically the Babylonian Empire being destroyed by the Medes and the Persians, and now it's Greece's turn. It said, and instead of it, there came up the appearance of 4 horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And we know that refers to the 4 generals who took charge of the area after Alexander the Great died. And out of them came forth a little horn. And who does the little horn represent? Antiochus Epiphanes of Hanukkah. Okay? And it said it waxed exceedingly great toward the southeast in the beautiful land, referring to Israel. It waxed great even to the host of heaven, referring to Israel, and some of the hosts and of the stars that cast down to the ground and trampled upon them. Okay, so now, here we come. Drum roll. Let's go to the next slide here so you can follow along. Listen to what it says. Daniel 8:11 through 13. Yea, he magnified himself, referring to Antiochus, even to the prince of the host, and from him the continual burnt offering was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and the host was given over to it together with the continual burnt offering through transgression. And it cast down truth to the ground, and it prospered. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said unto that certain one who spoke, how long will be the vision concerning the continual burnt offering? How many of you know they're talking about the continual burnt offering? Okay. How many of you know the burnt offerings are to be every evening and every morning? Okay. Daniel 8:14 in King James said 2,300 days, but that's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, and he said to me, unto 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Okay, he's talking about the sacrifices. Let me show you. Here is Genesis 1:5, where God says, okay, right here, let me show you. Evening and morning, day 1. And Erev, you can see the first circle, Erev and Boker. Boker Tov, good morning. Erev is evening. Boker is morning. Here is in Hebrew, oh, you can see Yom. Do you see in red, Yom is day. That's the Hebrew word for day. And there's Erev and Boker, evening and morning, day 1. Now here's Daniel 8:14. And you will notice it doesn't say Yom. It says Erev and Boker. So the King James is wrong. What he's really saying is there will be 2,300 evening and mornings. And the concern was the continual burnt offering. So we say, and we can see in one day, you have 2 sacrifices. There's a morning sacrifice and an evening sacrifices. So if that's the case, the 2,300 evenings and mornings is 1,150 days. Because there's 2 sacrifices every day, so you cut it in half, and it's not 2,300 days. It's 1,150 days. Does everyone follow me? Now I'm going to show you something else that will be mind-blowing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. How many of you know on the biblical calendar, sometimes there's 12 months, sometimes there's 13 months. Okay, you have the 12th month is Adar, sometimes you add Adar too. This rule is based on the Metonic cycle, which shows within 19 years, you have 235 lunar months. This is what keeps Passover in the spring. And so you know how every 4 years we add a leap day? On the biblical calendar, every 19 years, they have 7 times 13 months to keep it in the cycle. So as far as the Hebrew year, 5,700, there's an Adar 2. 5701, 5702, there's only 12 months. 5703, there's 13. 04 and 5, 12. 6 is 13, 7 is 12. 8 is 13, 9 and 10 are 12. 11 is 13, 12 and 13 are 12. 4, do you see what I'm saying? So it's not always every other year. Sometimes there's 2 years in between. Okay, so does everyone understand what I'm saying? Everyone here knows. So guess what? If it happens to be in this particular time frame, here 06 has 13 months, 07 has 12 months, and 08 has 13 months, right? So if you're counting the days in that time frame, well, there's 38 months. Now, listen to this. In 1 Maccabees, this is historical record, I'm not saying it's inspired, but in 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 54, it tells us that at Hanukkah time, okay, in there, the abomination was set up on Kislev 15, on the bottom left. That's when the abomination was set up on Kislev 15 in 167 BCE. And then First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 52 and 53 tells us the temple was rededicated on Kislev 25, which is why it's called what? Hanukkah. Okay, and that was in 164 BC. Well, guess what? If you take Kislev 15 to Kislev 15 during that time period, right? You take 38 months times 30, you get 1,140 days. You add the 10 days from Kislev 15 to Hanukkah, Kislev 25, you get the 1,150 days, which is the exact count of the 2,300 evening and morning sacrifices historically. Ta-da! Now you don't have to figure it out because first off, it's past, not future anyway. But we do need to remember history often repeats itself. But don't get caught up in that. And now what's fascinating, I have a little picture there. This is the wonderful book that I got from Art Scroll on the book of Daniel. Now, I don't agree with everything in this book, for heaven's sake. But one thing I have found, just like every spouse should want the other spouse's perspective to help round things out, I like the Jewish perspective on things. I don't agree with everything they say, but guess what? I don't agree with everything the Christians say either. Okay, so I like to get both sources, and then I know how to eat chicken. I can throw out the bone and eat the meat. And so what we need to do is know how to sort. But anyway, I want everyone to know that, and someone asked me about the 2,300 because they were concerned, and now you know the answer. Okay, now, let's go to the next thing right here. Let me see. Okay, again, Daniel 1, 2, 3, and 4 is all about Nebuchadnezzar. Then 67 years go by. The next three chapters that we've already looked at is chapter 7, chapter 8, and chapter 5. And now in the first year of Belshazzar, he has the vision of the lion, the bear, the leopard with four wings, and then this monster, which we know is just a repeat of his dream 70 years earlier that Nebuchadnezzar had that he interpreted. Okay? Then in the third year of Belshazzar, he has the dream of the ram, the goat with the four horns, the notable horn. Okay? Same dream, different animals. And then the handwriting on the wall. Well, today we are going to start looking at Darius the Mede, and next week as well. Chapter 6 is all three of these are the first year of Darius. Now, how many of you have ever heard of a Bible called the Parallel Bible, where they take the Gospels and they have all four Gospels, but they intertwine them together so you can kind of fill in the gaps? You really need to look at 6, 9, 11, and 12 as intertwined. You can almost intertwine them together. So even though we're reading them in different orders, we need to understand logically, and this is mind-blowing when you see this, they're all happening at the same time, in the same year. Everyone following me? 6, 9, 11, and 12 all happen in the first year of Darius. Okay, then when we're done, we'll go to Daniel chapter 10, which has the great warfare concerning Persia, Iran. Okay, that's where it ends, Daniel does, with chapter 10. All right, so now we're going to start with today's Daniel message. But I'm going to start with Daniel 5:31, because that's where we ended the last time. See, Daniel 5 is the third year of Belshazzar, if you remember the handwriting on the wall. So now we're going to pick it up with Daniel 6, but I want to conclude from last week with Daniel 5:31. In that night, Belshazzar the Chaldean was murdered, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. He was younger than me. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump ahead for just a minute to Daniel 9 also, which does happen the first year, because I will be intertwining these to help us get all this. Look at Daniel 9, verse 1 and 2. We see it was the first year of Darius, who was the son of who? Ahasuerus. Now, this is not the Ahasuerus of Esther. This is a different one. This is a different generation earlier. By descent, this guy was a Mede who was made king over the realm of who? Well, that's Babylon. So if Darius has the reign over Babylon, is it really a new reign, or is it the final reign of a king of Babylon? That's what he's reigning over. That's something we're going to consider. But let me go to this slide. I'm going to show you something that is totally amazing. How many of you know not everyone agrees on what happened in history? How many of you know history is always written by the victor? And it can change. That's why in our school system, history is constantly being changed depending on who has control of the curriculum. All right. Not everyone agrees with what I'm going to show you, but I got it from this book, so you know I'm not making it up. There are some scholars who believe this, there are some scholars who don't believe this. But here we go. We have the Medes and the Persians. We know that they ruled. We have Darius the Mede. That's who we're reading about. Darius had a daughter, and Darius the Mede had a son. What was Darius the Mede's father's name? All right, Ahasuerus. That's what we just read. Now, how many of you know the next king to take over was King Cyrus, the Persian? Well, guess what? King Cyrus married the daughter of Darius the Mede. Okay, in politics, sometimes there's marriages, especially back then. That's how they solved treaties. That's what Solomon did. He married all these other kings' daughters. Okay, so here you see King Cyrus married the daughter of Darius the Mede, which is why it was easy for him to transition. Now, guess what about his son? His son was named King Ahasuerus after grandpa. Okay, and this is the King Ahasuerus who married Queen Esther. And guess what? They had a son, and his name is King Darius of chapter 6, verse 1, the one that wanted to rebuild the temple. You can see why, because it's through Esther's line. All right, now this is what comes from this particular book. So I just wanted you to see how it's kind of interesting when you see the family relationships, historically, what is happening. Listen to Ezra 6, 1 through 3, that bottom King Darius. It says, but no, this isn't Darius the Mede. Okay, he was grandpa. Okay, Darius the king made a decree. A search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. There was found at Achmetha in the palace that is in the province of the Medes a roll, and therein was a record thus written. In the first year of Cyrus the king, the same Cyrus the king made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be built, the place where they offered sacrifices. Let the foundations thereof be strongly laid, and the height was 60 cubits, and the breadth 60 cubits. Okay, so this Darius, why is he so much willing to rebuild the tabernacle? Well, it's because that's what King Cyrus says, and what Darius the Mede, grandpa, wanted. I mean, it's all in the family. Okay, now let's go jump to Daniel 6. And we're going to look at verse 1 through 3. It pleased Darius, and again, this is Darius the Mede, to set over the kingdom 120 governors, let's say, who should be throughout the whole kingdom. And over these 120 governors were 3 presidents. Okay, so each president would cover 40 governors, of which what? Daniel was one of the presidents. Talk about a promotion. Daniel is one of 3 presidents that these governors might give account to them. Kind of sounds like Moses and Jethro, okay? And that the king should have no damage. And now look at this. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above all the presidents. So you got 3 presidents, and Daniel is the top dog. He's next to the king. Why? It says, because a surpassing spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Now, let me ask you something. If you are a religious conservative and you're going to be set over the whole realm, you're going to have some that don't want you, other presidents that don't want you over everything because they have a different view. So look what happens in Daniel 6, verse 4 and 5. Then the presidents, obviously this doesn't include Daniel, and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no fault in him. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we're not going to find anything against Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the laws of his God. Now watch what happens here. Daniel 6 through 9. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king. So that means there's like 120 people there. All these governors, everyone's there before King Darius. And they said to him, King Darius, live forever. Now look at this. All the presidents of the kingdom want this done. Hello, liar, liar, pants on fire. Daniel's one of these presidents. He's not even in the room. But they're hoping that King Darius won't see him among the crowd of 120 people. And they say, all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors, the princes, the counselors, the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and make a firm decree that whoever will ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save you, O king, he will be cast into the den of lions. And then they say, now, we want this done now. We don't want you to think about it. We don't want you to talk to anybody or discuss it. We want this done now, O king. Establish the decree, sign the writing that it's not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which alters not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing in the decree. He thought, hey, Daniel's a part of this. If Daniel's a part of this, that sounds good. And what happens in Daniel 6? Now, they also know it was for just a short time. They said, let's just do it for 30 days. Now, here's the mind-blowing thing. Do you know, lawfully, religiously, Daniel could have complied with this. It was not, what they asked was not against Torah. Okay? He could have just said, okay, I won't pray this month. So first off, you have to understand that. So what Daniel did was he was bold. It says, when Daniel knew the writing was signed, he went into his house and he opened the windows toward Jerusalem. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day. This is where they say the Amidah came from, the whole idea of the, great assembly coming together and deciding to pray 3 times a day. He gave thanks before his God as he did before. So in other words, he's not deciding to do anything new. He's just doing what he always has done. And in his mind, hey, he's just talking to God. He's not necessarily asking for any. I'm just doing what I always do. Nothing's changed. And then they came near. Oh, it says these men assembled. They found Daniel praying, making supplication before his God in their mind. And so they came near and spoke before the king concerning the king's decree. And they said, have you not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of you, O king, will be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, well, that's true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which doesn't alter. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what he was praying? Oh, what was he praying? What prayers got him thrown into the lion's den? I know what he was praying. I'm going to tell you exactly what he was praying. What got him thrown into the lion's den? But we'll look at that in a minute. Okay, Daniel 6, 13 through 15. Then they made answer and said before the king, Daniel, one of the prisoners of Judah. Notice they didn't say, Daniel, one of your presidents. It's Daniel, this prisoner of Judah. He has no respect for you, O king, or for the order signed by you, but 3 times a day he makes his prayer to God. And when this thing came to the king's ears, it was very evil to him. His heart was fixed on keeping Daniel safe. Until the going down of the sun, he was doing everything in his power to free him. And then these men said to the king, "Be certain, O king, that by the law of the Medes and the Persians, no order or law which the king has put into force may be changed." Okay, fascinating. And so look what happens in verse 16 and 17. Then the king gave the order, and they took Daniel and put him into the lion's hole. It's like a hole in the ground. They throw him in this hole. And the king said to Daniel, "Your God, whose servant you are at all times, will keep you safe." And it says, then they got a stone and put it over the mouth of the hole. And it was stamped with the king's stamp and with the stamp of the Lord. So the decision about Daniel might not be changed. You know why it has the king's stamp on it? Because he doesn't want those goofballs to go and take the stone off the lion's mouth and throw stones at Daniel and kill him. And they want their stamp on it so the king in the middle of the night doesn't move the stone and set him free. And so both of them don't trust the other. The king doesn't trust the lords to remove the stone and kill Daniel themselves, and they don't trust him not to free him in the middle of the night. Now, how old is Daniel when he's thrown in the lion's den? He's now in his 80s. Okay? But he's the lion king. He's from the tribe of Judah. Okay, the lion. So the lions respect him. And then in verse 18 through 20, the king went to his palace, spent the night fasting. He couldn't even sleep. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. At the first sign of daylight, man, it says at the break of day, the king rose and went in haste to the den of lions, and he came near to the den where Daniel was, and he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" And Daniel goes, "Hello, I'm here." He says, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." So the king was exceedingly glad. He commanded that Daniel should be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den. No harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Now, guess what his defamers had said? They didn't believe in the miracle, so they said, "Oh, the lions weren't hungry." So the king says, "Oh, yeah? We'll throw you in and see if they're hungry." And so it says in verse 24, the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. Not only them, but with their children and their wives. And it says, before they even reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Liars, liars, get in trouble. And so look what King Darius does now in verse 25 to 28. He writes to all people, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you." And now he says, "I am making a royal decree which cannot be altered," according to the Medes and the Persians, okay? "That in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His dominion shall be to the very end. He delivers and he rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He's the one who saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Wow. Now, let's go back to Daniel 9, 1 and 2 that we read earlier, but we're going to read verse 2 as well. We just finished chapter 6 in the den of lions. Now we're jumping to 9. "In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, mighty sent to Mede, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the what year? In the first year of King Darius." So it's the same year. "I, Daniel." See, this is the year he was thrown to the lion's den. Are you following me? Same year. I was meditating in the books the number of years, according to the word of the Lord to who? To Jeremiah the prophet must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely how many years? 70 years. Okay, so let's take a look here at this slide. How many of you are trying to figure out prophetically where we're at on God's calendar? How many of you sometimes wrestle with the numbers or wrestle with the time frame? That was Daniel's problem. He knew that there were 70 years, right? Now, if you'll look here, here is the time of Jeremiah when he was prophesying. And you can remember the king of Judah was Jehoiakim for 11 years. Jehoiakim for 3 months, then Zedekiah for 11 years. But during those 22 years, a lot is happening. You'll notice in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim is when Daniel was taken to Babylon. He was roughly 16 years old. And then in the 4th year was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar. And then in the 5th year, they were thrown in the lion's den. And then you go over to the 10th year. This is when 3,000 were taken captive by Babylon. And then in the 8th year, 10,000 were taken captive by Babylon, including the king, Jehoiakim and his mother. And then we find over in the last years of Zedekiah, Jerusalem is besieged in his 9th year. And then in the 10th year, which is the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, 832 captives are taken. And then in the 11th year, the temple is destroyed. And so Daniel is reading Jeremiah, and he says, when do these 70 years begin? Do they begin when Nebuchadnezzar's dad, took over? Or maybe they begin when I got hauled off to Babylon? No, maybe they begin when 10,000 were taken captive. No, maybe it's when the temple was destroyed. That's when the 70 years begin. No, maybe it's when Shadrach, Meshach were thrown into the fire at Abednego. No, maybe it's when this year over here, when the 3,023 were taken. No, maybe it's when the glory departed. You can see why he was trying to figure out where the 70 years were. He was even having trouble. You're going to find that. Okay, so let's see. Okay, now, here's the other thing. If you're Daniel and you're at the time of Darius the Mede, you're wondering, is this the transition time? Is Darius the Mede another king of Babylon because he's over the Chaldeans? Or is this transition time and really the beginning of Darius' reigns is when things are supposed to happen? Okay, Daniel wants answers. Well, if we were Daniel and we had the scroll of Jeremiah, let's open it up and let's look at what he was trying to figure out in his Bible. Let's look at Jeremiah 25, 11 and 12. Imagine yourself Daniel and you're reading this. You're trying to figure out when the 70 years are up. And it says, okay, the whole land, Israel, will become a ruin and a waste, and all these nations will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. So I would think, okay, so the 70 years then would end. But now it says, after 70 years are completed, I'm going to punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans. Well, wait a minute. Darius the Mede is over the land of Chaldea, so maybe I got a year to go. Okay, are you following me? Okay, so this sounds like the 70-year count might begin. Take a look at this little slide I have here. Okay, you'll notice to the far right. How many of you know before Babylon was Assyria? Okay? Their capital was Nineveh. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's dad, they had conquered Nineveh in 612 BC. So the Assyrian Empire moved over to Haran. And then Babylon destroyed the Assyrian Empire in Haran in 609 BC. And if you drop down to 609 BC, where I have Megiddo circled, this is where the famous Battle of Megiddo took place, that is mentioned in your Bible, where Egypt is coming up through Megiddo to help the Assyrians defeat Nebuchadnezzar in Haran. And this is where Josiah, in the Battle of Megiddo, goes to stop Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he gets killed. This is why there's a new king after King Josiah. Well, then 4 years later, in 605 BC, is the famous Battle of Carchemish, and now the Assyrian Empire is completely done with, and Babylon is in control. So, wow, do we begin the 70 years in 612 and 609 and 605? Where is the standard? Okay, well, let's go look at 2 Chronicles 36, 14 through 17. It says, and more than this, all the great men of Judah and the priests and the people made their sin great. Can you imagine this? The great men of Judah and even the priests and even the people made their sin great. They turned to all the disgusting ways of the nations, and they made unclean the house of the Lord, which he had made holy in Jerusalem. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them by his servants, sending them early, sending them frequently, because he had pity on his people and on his living place. But what did the people do? And the princes and the great men and the priests? They put shame on those servants of God, making sport of God's words or Jeremiah's words, and laughing at his prophets, till the wrath of God was moved against his people, till there was no help. So he sent against them the king of the Chaldeans, who put their young men to death with the sword in the house of their holy place, had no pity for any young man or virgin, old man or white-haired. God gave them into all his hands. So when they see the Chaldean Empire came over them, he's thinking, well, wow, maybe the 70 year starts after Darius, who's over the reign of the Chaldeans. But you know what's fascinating about this verse I wanted to bring out, how it talks about how God frequently and early kept sending his servants to warn his people to mend their ways. And what did they do? They mocked them. They made sport of them. Well, look at Matthew chapter 21, verse 33 through 39, where Yeshua says, listen to this parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a fence around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. See, this should remind you of Isaiah chapter 5. If you don't know that verse, reference it and go back and read it. He leased it to sharecroppers and went on a long journey. And when the harvest time of the fruit came near, he sent his servants to the sharecroppers to receive his share of the produce. And the sharecroppers seized his servants. They beat up one, killed another, pelted a third with stones. So again he sent another group of servants, larger than the first. They, however, did the same thing to them. After this he sent his son, saying, they will honor my son. But when the sharecroppers saw the son, they reasoned among themselves, well, this is the only heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. And they seized him and threw him out of the vineyard and murdered him. This is exactly what the Lord is referencing. The people of his day were just the same as those in Jeremiah's day. Now, if you're Daniel and you're reading about history, you're thinking, well, maybe the 70 years is based on them not keeping the Shemitah cycle. Look at 2 Chronicles 36, 18 through 22. It says, and all the vessels of the house of God, the great and the small, and the stored wealth of the Lord's house, and the wealth of the kings and his chiefs, Nebuchadnezzar took away to Babylon. And then it says the house of God was burned, and the wall of Jerusalem was broken down. All of its great houses were burned with fire. All of its beautiful vessels were given up to destruction. All who had not come to death by the sword, he took away prisoners to Babylon, and they became servants to him and to his sons till the kingdom of Persia came to power. So now Daniel's thinking, okay, the 70 years ends when Cyrus, king of Persia, comes to power, because Darius the Mede isn't a Persian. So definitely it's after Darius the Mede. And so I still got another year to go here, or how long does Darius the Mede gonna? We know he only reigned 1 year and then died. But Daniel, during that first year of King Darius, is trying to figure out where to count the 70 years. And if he reads this and it's until the kingdom of Persia, he goes, wow, I wonder how long I've got till the kingdom of Persia comes to power. And then look, it says, so that the words of the Lord, which he said by the mouth of who? Jeremiah, might come true, till the land had pleasure in her Sabbaths. For as long as she was waste, the land kept the Sabbath till 70 years are complete. Oh, wow, so the 70 years are until the Sabbaths are complete. And then look at this. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order that the words which the Lord has said by the mouth of Jeremiah might come true, here it is. This tells us. This is telling us. It's when Cyrus comes to power that the 70 years are completed. The spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, was moved by the Lord. He made a public statement and had given it out to all of his kingdom, and he even put it in writing. Now, some historians say that Cyrus began his reign in 539 BC. So when we get to Daniel 10, it's the third year of Cyrus, which means it's like 537, 536 BC. But get a load of this. We find in Zechariah, which is 19 years later, there's a different Darius. Okay, and it goes back to the verse I read that happened today. But first, let's look at this. It's the 8th month in the 2nd year of Darius. Came the word of the Lord to Zechariah. And it says, the Lord has been displeased with your fathers. Therefore say to them, says the Lord of hosts, turn to me, says the Lord of hosts, and I will turn to you. This is like in 520 BC at this time. Because it's like, 20 years later. Cyrus was like 540. 20 years later, it's 520. This is the other Darius now. Well, look at this. Zechariah 1, 7, and 8. And then on the 24th day of the 11th month, a few months later, here's when he sees the red horse in the myrtle trees, which is today. But I want to point out the next verse in chapter 12. Then it says, the angel of the Lord answered, saying, O Lord of armies, how long will it be before you have mercy on Jerusalem and on the towns of Judah, against which your wrath has been burning for 70 years? Well, now wait a minute. This is 20 years after we thought the 70 years ended. So is this 70 years talking about a different 70 years? Or is it talking about that 70-year time frame and nothing has happened? You can see why prophetically things can be confusing. All right? Okay. Now, let me see where I'm at. Let me show you this. This is mind-blowing. Again, here's the list. We're in Daniel 6. We just finished Daniel 6 where he's thrown into the lion's den for praying. Right? And notice, Daniel 9, 11, and 12 are the same time frame. They're all the same year. How many of you know the devil doesn't want you praying? Especially when it comes to something huge and prophetic like the 70-year captivity ending. There's a big transition. How many of you know right now we're living in a big transition time? Okay. You ever wonder what Daniel was praying? Here it is. This is his prayer right here. Daniel 9. This is what he was praying. Look at verse 3 through 5. This is why you have to read your Bible chronologically. This is why if we're in Daniel 9 and you connect it to Daniel 8, that doesn't work. You have to connect Daniel 9 to Daniel 6. That's why you have to read your Bible in order. Here's what he's praying. Look at verse 3 through 5. So I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy. That's what they accused him of. with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed to the Lord my God, and I made confession. And I said, O Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Wow, where did we hear that? Did we hear that this morning in the Torah portion? And in the New Testament, according to John, we know we love God if we obey him and keep his commandments. Oh my goodness, it's right here as well. And he says, we have sinned and we have done wrong and acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. That's what's going on today. People are lawless. They want nothing to do with God's commandments or rules. They see them as legalism. But here he is praying. And look at verse, and I think it's amazing. I believe Daniel was very righteous, and yet he takes on the burden of the sins of the people. He doesn't say, they are people, my people. He says, me. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name. Wow, that's what we just got done reading that also was mentioned in Matthew in the Gospels. It says, have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and to all the people of the land. To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as at this day. To the men of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to all of Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, and all the lands to which you've driven them because of the treachery that they have committed against you. He's confessing, he's repenting, and the devil says, go throw him in the lion's den. We got to stop this. Verse 8 through 12. To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, princes, fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belongs mercy and forgiveness. We have rebelled against him, have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by walking in his Torah, which he set before us by his servants, the prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. And the curse and the oath that are written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, has been poured out upon us. Because we've sinned against him, he has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us and against our rulers who ruled us, by bringing upon us great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what has been done against Jerusalem. You know what's amazing? Daniel was 1,000 years after Moses, and yet he thought it still applied. Look at verse 13 through 15. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this calamity has come upon us, yet we've not entreated the favor of the Lord our God, turning from our iniquities and getting insight by your truth. Therefore, the Lord has kept ready the calamity and has brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all the works that he has done, and we've not obeyed his voice. And now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand and have made a name for yourself, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly. And then in verse 16 and 17, he says, O Lord, according to all your righteous acts, let your anger and your wrath turn away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy hill, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people have become a byword among all who are around us. Now, therefore, O our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas for mercy for your own sake. O Lord, make your face to shine upon your sanctuary, which is desolate. The devil is not liking this prayer. And so in verse 18 and 19, he says, Oh my God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes. See our desolations in the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake, O my God, because your city and your people are called by your name. I think this is a prayer that we should be praying today as a nation. We need to pray with the right attitude. If we want God to hear our prayers, it has to be from the right frame of reference. Now, look at this in Daniel 9, 20 and 21. He says, while I was speaking and praying and confessing. What's the difference between speaking, praying, confessing? Interesting. My sin. He doesn't say Israel's sin. He says, while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, I can't help but think of God and Moses battling. Well, God tells Moses, your people. And Moses says, no, God, they're your people. And here Daniel is saying, my people Israel. And presenting my plea before the Lord my God for the holy hill of my God. While I was speaking in prayer, look at this, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. That's 3 in the afternoon. But now here's what's interesting. It says, whom I had seen in the vision. Well, there is no vision in Daniel 9. In Daniel 9, he says, the man Gabriel came in the vision I'd seen at the first. So what vision is he talking about? It was the vision from the third and final year of Belshazzar. Look at Daniel. And I believe it was the vision of the ram and the goat. Okay, see the third year of Belshazzar? The first year there was the lion, the bear, the leopard. And then in the third year is the ram and the goat. And I believe that that is the vision he was asking about. And look at this. Look at this. Daniel 9, 22 and 23. He had already seen the vision, right? And it says in 9, 22 and 23, Gabriel made me to understand, speaking with me and saying, O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out, and I've come to tell it to you, for you are greatly loved. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. He'd already had the vision once. It was supposedly explained to him. You would think if you had a vision from God and explained to you that you understood it. But guess what? He didn't get it. So now he comes back to explain it to him. And he says, you are greatly loved. You know, 3 times it is written that Daniel is greatly loved. And besides Daniel 9 here, it's in Daniel 10 and verse 11, where he said to me, O Daniel, you man dearly loved. And in Daniel 10:19, and he said to me, O man, greatly loved, have no fear, peace be with you, be strong and let your heart be lifted up. Be strong and courageous. Remember that at the end of every Torah portion. What's interesting is in this book, they talked about the 3 times he said he's greatly loved. He hears, how many of you would like to have an angel tell you you're greatly loved? Well, it says the first time the angel wanted him to know that your creator loves you. The second time it was because the heavenly host loves you too. And the third time is because the people of your generation also love you. Anyway, so let's go to Daniel 8. Verse 16 through 19. This is why I believe it was that vision. See, if you're in Daniel 9, okay, and you read in Daniel 9 about Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision, but there's no vision in Daniel 9, how are you going to know what it's tied to? Okay, well, look at Daniel 8, 16 through 19. Here we hear of Gabriel. I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. He got the vision, but he doesn't get it. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, fell on my face, and he said to me, understand, O son of man, at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me, set me upright, and he said, behold, I will make you know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. At the time appointed, the end shall be. Well, guess what? Daniel still didn't get it, and so he needed more information. So Gabriel is sent back to Daniel a year later. It's now chapter 9. All right? So let's go back to Daniel 9, 24 through 25. Now, instead of 70 years, he's hearing about 70 weeks. He says 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city. And look what is supposed to happen. To finish the transgression, put an end to sin. Has that happened yet? Okay, so we got to understand parts of this prophecy haven't been fulfilled. Some of it has. To atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness. Has that happened yet? To seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. Okay, that happened with King Cyrus. To the coming of an anointed one, or the Messiah. This is Mashiach. This could be saying until the Messiah, a prince. As in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7, he's called the prince. There will be 7 weeks, and then for 62 weeks, it will be built again with squares and a moat, but in a troubled time. Okay. Well, get a load of this. Now, 70 weeks is really 70 weeks of years. It refers to 490 years. When this says 70 weeks, it doesn't mean 70 literal. It means 70 Shemitah cycles. Okay? And 70 times 7 is 490 years. Now, in Daniel 9:26, it says, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and shall have nothing. And then it says, the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, which we know happens in 70 A.D. by Rome. And the end will come with a flood, and to the end there will be war. Desolations are decreed. And then in Daniel 9:27, he'll make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, which means 7 years. And half of the week he'll put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate until the decree end is poured out on the desolator. Okay, let's take a look here and we'll wrap things up. Okay, we have to remember Nebuchadnezzar got the vision of the countries that were going to take over which country. The gold head was Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. The 2 arms, silver, Medes and the Persian. The bronze, Greece. And then Rome was the iron. This came to Daniel in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar. This is Daniel chapter 2 and 3. Then 67 years later, you have Daniel chapter 7. It's the 1st year of Belshazzar. Now Daniel is reminded of the vision at the first, but he sees, instead of the gold head, the lion's head for Babylon, the bear for the Medes and the Persian, and the leopard for Greece. And then in Daniel 8, which is now the 3rd year of Belshazzar, this time he has the same vision of the same nations, but again differently. This time the Medes and the Persian are the 2 horns of the ram. And Greece is the he-goat, with the notable horn being Alexander the Great. And so what we're going to do now is, let me click over here. We're going to jump next week into 9, 11, 12, begin to wrap things up. But isn't this interesting? When you look at how all of this is coming together. And what's fascinating is when it's like the parallel gospels. When you take this book and you start to interweave things, things start opening up. So with that said, let's stand.